Well, hello again. This is Mr. Taylor. We have been through our assessment of bivariate data, and what we've done is we've taken that data and constructed an actual scatter plot. And within that scatter plot, we looked at the association or the correlation of that data to determine whether it was increasing, determine whether it was, which means the data was going from left to right, going upward. We looked at whether or not it was a decreasing correlation or association, and that means going from left to right, the data was going downward, had a downward trend. And we also looked at the cluster of the data. We looked at whether the data was clustered around a particular point, or we looked at whether the data was actually clustered along a particular line. So as we went forward, we looked at what we call a trend line, which is a line that we use to determine what is the actual slope and prediction, or actually the slope or the equation of the actual data set, and see if we can make prediction, and we use this trend line to do so. So this is where we are now. We want to take a look at Explore Activity 2 and determine how can we make predictions with our trend line. So this will be your learning objective, that you will use a particular trend line or the equation and make a prediction. So your key vocabularies that you would have to make sure that you be aware of and keep your eye on, write down in your notes, is interpolate and extrapolate. Well, what do we mean when we talk about making these predictions? When you use a trend line or the equation to predict a value, and you predict these values between the data points that you already know, you interpolate the predicted value. So what I want to do is make sure, as I go here quickly, to make sure that we sort of understand. This is what we use from example 1. We're going to use this as we look at this particular activity. And as we can see, we're talking about pages that are in chapters. How many particular chapters and how many pages that chapter would have. And if you notice from the data starts here, and it goes, as far as chapters, it goes to 19 chapters. So it goes to 19 chapters, and pages, as far as pages, it goes from 0 pages to 220 pages. So we know this data. We see it. We actually, there's a trend line to make us predict, but we know this data. So anything we do within this data from 0 to 18 chapters, or from 0 to 220 pages, we say that we are interpolating the predicted value. Now, if we were to look at the same data and you want to make a prediction outside, we say that's extrapolate. So we interpolate or we extrapolate. Now, what are we talking about when we say extrapolate? What if I wanted to do, let's say, what if I say I had a book with 20 chapters? That is not on our data. We don't have data for that. So the only thing we can do there is simply make a prediction, and we'd have to make that prediction not with the trend line. We'd have to make that prediction with the equation right here. So that's the difference in what we're trying to do. Okay. All right. So again, we're going to use this particular. Yep, we're there. So we want to use this particular data set. We're going to use this data and this trend line and this equation to work through part of this lesson. So it says use what we just saw in example 1. to predict a book with 26 chapters. So if you could, you might want to, let's go back here. You might want to stop it here and go ahead and copy this information down. You might want to go ahead and create this graph again. If you don't have it already in your book, if you have it already, then that's don't worry about that. But if you do not, go ahead and copy this down. If you have graphing paper, that's divine. But if not, just plain note paper will do, and your equation. And then once you do so, just come on back. Okay. So here's what I need you to do. Now that you have your example 1 handy, I want you to look at this and look at the statement. It's saying, well, what about a book with 26 chapters? And I need you to tell me, is this interpolation or extrapolation? Whether it's the data that you know, or is it outside the data, within the data that you know, or outside the data? That's what you want to answer here. Give me the equation, substitute the number of chapters, which is 26 for x, and then simplify, and then go ahead and answer that question. So go ahead and stop it now and take care of that. Okay, now let's look at what we will do if we can predict how many pages would be in a book with 14 chapters. And then I want you to answer for me, is this prediction an example of interpolation or extrapolation? So pretty much the same thing we just did for the last question. And then answer for me, which one of the two do you feel is more accurate? And then explain. Okay, go ahead and stop it and then come back and we'll go through. Okay, so if we went back to the graph, if you don't mind, if it's okay, I want to go back and look at the graph so we can answer the first question. Is this prediction interpolation or extrapolation? So let's go back to the graph and look. So we're going to go back. Now, they're talking about 26 chapters. This is outside of the data that we have. So if it's outside of the data that we have, it's extrapolation. So that would be the reason why the author chose that answer. Our equation from that trend line from example 1 was y equals 10x. So in order to define what we feel would be the number of pages for 26 chapters, we would just substitute. Remember, 10x means that there are 10 pages per chapter. That's what that 10, the slope, meant. 10 pages per chapter. X is the number of chapters. So we substitute 10 in for 26 and we'll get 226. So we would predict that if a book had 26 chapters, we are just simply predicting that it would have somewhat like 260 pages. Okay? Now, number 7. It says, predict how many pages would be in a book with 14 chapters. Well, and then is this interpolation or is it extrapolation? And we see they said 140, and now sure you could have used the equation, but let's go back to the graph. Since it is within, we're looking at this graph and it says 14 chapters. So my friends, here's what we're going to do. We're going to determine 14 chapters. Well, let's see, there's 14, and I'm going to go up to my line. Take me a little line, I'm going to go here. Well, I got that part. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from this over to where I see my answer would be, which is approximately 140. So this is how I would use a trend line to determine how many pages would be in a book with 14 chapters. Okay? So then we say, since we were able to do that from the trend line, if you can do it from the trend line that you see, it's interpolation. That's all that means. Nothing really difficult at all. Now it says, do you think that extrapolation or interpolation is more accurate and explain? Well, since we can use that trend line to predict, we see that data. So interpolation would be more accurate, and the predicted value fits between what we know. We know what the values are, and we know where the trend is going because we can literally see it. And the reason why, another reason why, is because there's no guarantee from outside of what we see that trend, that's going to continue the way it goes. It could go up, down, or it could just be scattered completely. So interpolation is by far the most accurate because we can see not only the data itself, but we can also see the trend. Okay, I definitely hope you got something out of this. If not, as always, I welcome your comments. And also, if you have not subscribed, please do so. This is Mr. Taylor, and I will see you soon.